hello. Welcome to the Talk with T. Renee. I'm your host, T. Renee Mathis, and this episode we're talking about depression, and we are all here together to talk about a documentary, The Face of Darkness, and I have a good person I just met, David Rockwell. David Rothwell, and you're a master level psychotherapist. You're working on your master's.
No, I have my master's.
You have your master's?
My master's, yes. I just completed my national counseling certification exam, and I'm working towards licensure, which is a process of about 3,000 hours. I'm 1,000 hours into that, working to become licensed in the state of Pennsylvania.
Wonderful, wonderful. Why did you get into this field? Because I was told that it's like less than 10% of people with color in this field.
Oh, yes, and even more with males. The field is filled with qualified female clinicians, and at my agency, Creative Health Services Incorporated, located in the suburbs of Philadelphia, I am not only the only male full-time clinician, but the only minority male full-time clinician. So, and that those numbers are across the board in the field. But what brought me in, I heard the quote that one's vocation or calling is the intersection between the world's greatest hurt and your greatest pleasure. My undergrad was in business and economics, and I went to study abroad in Austria, the birthplace of psychotherapy, and there was a point that came across where, what do I want to do? Where am I going to find my calling? How I'm going to make my living? And I found my most joy when I was talking to people, when I was just really listening to people and giving back some feedback, which many years ago was very novice and without the clinical backing, but still just being there. And I think that's the power of talk therapy, is that people find that relationship. They mend attachments that were broken in early childhood experiences with a complete stranger that becomes someone intimate in their lives.
Absolutely, and David, I can attest to that. I know that David has to say that because he's in the field and he believes it, and he's absolutely true. I lost my brother 9 months ago to stage 4 cancer, and I was devastated. And one of the producers, Kenneth, which is my god brother, said, go talk. I'm like, okay, fine. What is this doctor going to tell me? Unless he can tell me that my brother's going to come back, then I don't want to talk about it. But I did feel better, not overnight, but they gave me a tool, and one of those tools was just cry and write if you can.
To normalize your experience, that's very common. People are hesitant to go seek help. What are they going to do for me? No one can bring back the loss that I experienced. No one can take back the loss that I lost through a rape, through a trauma, through molestation. What is this doctor, what is this clinician, what is this therapist going to do for me? And I think it's just that, being able to cry and someone saying that it's okay to do what you've been doing and that this is the part of the process. And I think sitting in the process is very, very important. Myself, I take a more emotion-focused perspective through training on therapy and process experiential. My whole orientation is, how do we expand your emotional tolerance for distressing emotions? Depression being one of them. I think these crises that people engage in their lives that causes the depressions produce emotion, and it becomes overwhelming. So how do we increase that? And that's by experiencing it. So sometimes therapy is painful. Sometimes you're crying. Sometimes you hate your therapist. But it's all about that process in terms of well-being and health.
I agree. And what are some tips? Because I know that one of our guests, Jazz Anderson, was saying that he got into drugs and alcohol. I more like the Iman that was earlier. We eat. You know, if something is going on where we feel like we're about to do something that is destructive, what are a few things that we can even do and stop, just like right today, if somebody's listening and they feel like they want to take a drink or they want to go eat or they want to have sex with somebody they don't know or use some drugs, what are a couple of things that they can do right now?
First to say, people do drugs and they eat because it works. These are self-medicating behaviors. These are medications that relieve temporarily the anxiety and the sadness and the feelings of hopelessness that is there. I would say that for one person who is at the verge that they can even think about asking the question, what do I do, is at a good point. They've stopped themselves from acting out what is inside of them. And so in terms of skills, reaching out to someone, journaling, talking, self-talk, telling yourself about the thinking patterns that you have engaged in, this negative outlook on life, trying to change that and trying to catch yourself. You can take a behavioral approach. Some people have heard that putting a rubber band over on your wrist, and every time you have a negative thought, hit it. And then by behaviorally training yourself not to think that way. And then obviously seeking out help. I think it's very important talking about depression in the sense of worthlessness and hopelessness, that even worse than drugs and binge eating will be self-harming, risky behaviors, suicide. And I think that is the tell sign that someone is having a problem.
Absolutely, because this is, the most important question. Okay, we are sometimes with the depression, we feel like, oh, I didn't go to school, I'm 50 years old, blah, blah, blah. But Lee Thompson was not probably where he wants to be, because nobody is, but he was on TV. Chris Lightley, music. Don Cornelius has been through stuff. I mean, we can go through pages and pages to see what Don Cornelius, and with his age, what he went through just as a man, as a race. But they took their life, and they had money, they had admiration, and they also had the ability to call somebody on a dial and say, you're a therapist, right? Blah, 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 blah. I'll pay you. David, come on. I got $10,000. Come over. Just stay with me. Why didn't they do that?
I think partially a part about that, and with the media and those who are in the limelight, is just that. They're in the limelight. We don't know their real story. All we know is these characters, the famous Jet Jackson. All we know are these Soul Train. I mean, I don't know his story. I don't know his developmental history, and they do. The people who are close to them, they know the story. And I feel like they put on this mask day in and day out. When the cameras go cut, they go home to their despair, and they don't feel like it's the outlet. And it could be the stigma involved with what would happen to my career if, in fact, this gets out. And so people don't want to. I think confidentiality within the therapeutic relationship is so important. It's a sacred relationship between a clinician and their consumer, and that needs to be upheld.
Absolutely. And I'm going to end on that note. I want you guys to know, because people of color, we're real big with nobody telling us our business. When you go to speak to somebody like David, it doesn't matter what you say, he will not throw away your trust, right? It's a bond.
Yeah, I mean, let's keep it with reason. This is the big three. Reports to harm self, reports to harm someone else, and reports of child abuse. Usually within the HIPAA laws, those are the only times I would have to, by law, report elsewhere. But other than that, your deepest, darkest things that you don't tell yourself is something that your therapist should keep to themselves.
That's wonderful. And last question, where could we go? Okay, if we decide to right now, there's somebody that's watching, okay, I'll try it, I'll go. Where do we go? Do you just call your local healthcare coverage and say, I need a psychiatrist or a therapist? Or do you just go to the local hospital? What would be the first step?
Well, the first step, depending on where you are, if you do have health insurance, then contact your primary care provider, figure out what's covered. Some insurance plans allow 20 sessions within a certain time period. If you don't have coverage, where I work in Montgomery County, there's county funding. If you have no form of paying, the county will put forth an allotted amount for 60 days of services, and then you can apply for extension. During the meantime, we'll help you out with assistance with getting Medicare, with the Obamacare that has been rolling out. There are systems involved or being created to help people in disenfranchised situations to get help. But calling a friend, calling someone, contacting the people of this documentary, yourself, and put them in context, reaching out to the hospital. I think worst case scenario, 911, if it's that bad, not for, I lost my job and I'm sad, but no, we're going to be serious about what's going on. And if you are about to self-harm, call help.
Thank you so much for coming today. I think the takeaway, guys, is that it's 2014. It's a new year. Go out and get help. Talk to a friend. Pray. Write. Journal. It's okay. We've all been there. We've all dealt with depression, and we will, unfortunately, if we live longer, deal with depression in the future. Okay? Stay blessed. Stay healthy. The Talk with T. Renee. Thank you.